Welcome to the Workplace Minute, powered by H3 Advisors and sponsored by WorkHuman. Thanks for joining me for your quick update on what's important in the world of work. My name is Steve Boese. Today in the Workplace Minute, we're tackling one of the biggest and most confusing questions in the world of work right now. Is AI actually starting to replace jobs, or are we getting ahead of the data? Let's dive in. Depending on who you listen to, the answer to this disruption question is dramatically different. In Silicon Valley, the narrative often leans towards rapid disruption. Entire categories of work are being automated, entry-level roles are disappearing, and the labor market is being fundamentally reshaped in just a few short years. But when you look at what economists, and more importantly, what the data are actually saying, the picture is a lot more nuanced. It's less dramatic and maybe a little bit more familiar than we'd expect. So let's step back from some of the headlines and dig into what history and the latest labor market data can really tell us about how AI is likely to impact jobs and workers. So why do economists generally seem more cautious than many folks in Silicon Valley about the potential economic impacts of artificial intelligence, especially when forecasting some extreme scenarios? Well, one big reason, the baseline case is informed by economic history. It's a hardly unreasonable starting point when dealing with an important new set of innovations. And what does history show? The economic stories of transformative technologies often display two important impacts. First, expect a rough patch to many jobs at some point. For example, railroad overbuilding fueled the economic panics of 1873 and turn-of-the-century electrification projects saw speculative excess in utility holding companies. In the 1990s, dot-com boom went bust, and that bankrupted many firms. Yet in each instance, business productivity eventually surged, living standards climbed, and the predictions of permanent technological unemployment, well, they turned out to be wrong. Workers got reallocated, but not eliminated. And while what those workers did changed shape, the work itself didn't disappear. In a new analysis called Lessons from the 5 Innovation Waves That Preceded AI, Morgan Stanley's economics team highlights this encouraging pattern across 250 years and 5 broad waves of innovation. They note that while technological revolutions invariably bring short-term disruptions and uncertainty, they also deliver significant long-run benefits. So certainly from a pro-innovation perspective, the most intriguing finding is the eventual outcomes of these 5 technology waves rather than the early or mid-course disruptions. The examples that they use are canals and early factory building accelerated America past its agricultural roots, but it did cut farm employment from 75% of people to just over half of the people by 1850. Railroads and investments, they averaged 2.5% of the country's GDP annually, which connected regional markets and made a continental or a national economy possible. Electrification and motorization helped double output per hour in one generation and enabled things like mass production and national consumer markets. And post-World War II, electronics and aviation coincided with GDP growth above 4% a year, alongside a major expansion of federal and technical R&D. And finally, the internet era roughly doubled productivity growth in the late 1990s, shifting investments from factories and building things towards software and IP. So the big questions facing us now as we think about all that is this: might AI, which could be the next wave or the 6th innovation wave, will it be of equal or greater importance to those other 5? Will it be different? Morgan Stanley doesn't rule that out. They acknowledge that AI could mostly substitute for labor rather than augment it, and trigger a falling labor share and more concentrated gains. In the report, they say, we do not rule out that AI could defy historical precedents and create more extreme outcomes. The historical record, however, suggests the burden of proof belongs to the folks clamoring for widespread and permanent destruction of jobs. And so far, their case rests more on what AI could theoretically do than what labor markets are actually showing so far. And what are they showing? According to a second Morgan Stanley report, one very much reflecting the current state of the job market, the bank finds not so much. Its new AI disruption tracker finds aggregate labor market impact remains tiny, at most about 0.1% on the unemployment rate. And even that may reflect post-COVID overhiring rather than AI itself. Yes, there are some early signs of stress among younger workers in high AI-exposed roles. But at the industry level, the sectors most exposed to AI have actually been hiring faster than others, although the report cautions this may reflect just other underlying trends rather than AI technology itself. And moreover, workers in those roles increasingly report changes in their day-to-day tasks, which is a pattern more consistent with AI reshaping work rather than replacing workers. And even those signals remain statistically weak. Additionally, Goldman Sachs is out with their own findings one that considers some underappreciated impact of AI in the job market. Goldman Sachs notes that their estimates using our new measure suggest that AI substitution and augmentation have only been a modest net drag on the labor market over the past year, reducing monthly payroll growth by roughly 16,000 jobs and raising the unemployment rate by 0.1%, with much of the cost falling on less experienced workers. The true aggregate impact of AI is likely smaller than this. These estimates do not fully capture the offsetting effects of hiring for data center construction or incremental labor demand generated by AI-related productivity and income gains. So where does all of this leave HR and business leaders trying to make sense of this? Well, the key takeaway, I think, is this. The disruption from AI is real, but right now it's showing up far more in how work is changing than in how many jobs are disappearing. Tasks are shifting, skill requirements are evolving, and certain groups, especially early career workers, might feel that pressure first. But on the large scale, immediate job displacement that dominates a lot of the public conversations, well, that data isn't just showing up yet, not yet. And that creates both a risk and an opportunity. The risk is overreacting to this hype, making workforce decisions based on what AI might someday be able to do instead of what it's actually doing today. But the opportunity certainly is much more compelling to focus on redesigning work, reskilling employees, and using AI to augment human capability in ways that can drive real productivity gains. Because if history is any guide, this won't be the end of work. It will be a reshaping of work. And the organizations that get this right won't be the ones that simply cut headcount. They'll be the ones who rethink how their work gets done. That's it for today's Workplace Minute. If you're leading through this moment of uncertainty, the question isn't when AI will change work. It's how intentionally you're going to shape that change inside your organization. A big thank you to WorkHuman for supporting the Workplace Minute. Be sure to subscribe to the HR Happy Hour Network on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Steve Boese, and this has been the Workplace Minute from H3 HR Advisors.